Okay, let's get started. We have a packed agenda today. All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kate Stewart. I'm the COG Board Chair, and I like to call to order this meeting of the COG Board in September. And thank you all for joining us virtually today. Our first order of business is to say the Pledge of Allegiance, so I will lead us in that. If you would like to follow along, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Now, just a couple of logistical things to remind everyone the procedures we follow when we are virtual. Please keep your microphones muted during the presentations. If you'd like to speak, you can unmute your line, raise your hand, put a note in the chat, and we will call upon you. As a reminder, our meeting today is being live streamed on the COG website through COG's YouTube account. And our first thing I'm going to do is turn it over to Monica to complete a roll call to document your presence at this meeting. Monica, do you want to do that now?
Yes, from the District of Columbia, I have Charles Allen. Is there anyone else from the District of Columbia? From Maryland jurisdictions, I have Reuben Collins, Michael O'Connor, Victoria Venable, Denise Mitchell, Emmett Jordan, Kristen Weaver, Craig Moe, Evan Glass, Kate Stewart, Tara Jackson, Tom Dernoga, Bridget Newton, and Brian Feldman. Is there anyone else from a Maryland jurisdiction? In Virginia, I have Justin Wilson, Catherine Reed, Penny Gross, Rodney Lusk, David Snyder, Julie Briskman, Ann Wheeler, and Andrea Bailey. Is there anyone else from a Virginia jurisdiction? All right, thank you. We have quorum, Chair.
Thank you, Monica. And thank you everyone again for joining. I'm glad to see such a robust turnout for our September meeting. One note to remind everyone is to please mark your calendars for our COG annual membership meeting that is scheduled on December 13th. And we will hold it this year at the Kellogg Conference Hotel at Gallaudet. It will be from 11:30 to 2 p.m. and the staff is dropping the registration link in the chat now. I will now turn it over to our executive director so that he can provide his report. Mr. Mercer?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. I will be brief. We have an action-packed lineup today and really looking forward to hearing our speakers and guests. Another date to flag for you, and we'll be sending the invitation out today, is October 25th. And there will be a networking reception for our COG board members with our U.S. senators from the delegation, Cardin, Van Hollen, Kane, and Warner. And that will be hosted on Capitol Hill. So that will be a good opportunity for us to meet with our senators as a region. So the October 25th, an afternoon reception, and the invite will be going out this afternoon. Couple items to highlight from our most recent meeting to now. Our CAOs in the region did sign on to a letter. This is a result of our retreat, and that letter went to the Office of Management and Budget. So we had 23 CAOs sign on to the letter, essentially backing President Biden's commitment to getting a better balance of in-office and hybrid work for our federal workforce, and offering to be a resource for OMB as it works through plans with 32 individual agencies, pointing out that our counties and cities have been in that posture now for a couple of years and have lessons learned that they're happy to share. Over the summer, a couple events I went to of note: Loudoun Chamber of Commerce panel on affordable housing that went well. We had a joint COG Board of Trade meeting on metro and other regional priorities. We're having another one of those end of this week. And then on July 13th, the Federal City Council had a reimagined downtown DC summit that I participated in as well, carrying the COG flag. I know you all have heard quite a bit about our water supply and drought coordination. For the first time in 13 years, our drought coordination technical committee met on September 5th to decide if COG should issue a drought watch for the region. And based on the information that was available, the consensus was not to move forward with that at this time due to the rainfall we received recently. We didn't need to move forward to that. But needless to say, coordination is ongoing, and this latest episode has been an opportunity to remind officials, the media, and the public of the importance of resiliency in our water supply. And a lot of where we're at right now in terms of being in a good position is due to our past investment in upstream reservoirs. COG has worked with our congressional delegation to seek funding on a federal study of water supply alternatives, and we're hopeful that funding will come through in a future appropriations bill. Probably also saw the news that this is Hunger Action Month, and the news was disappointing. Capital Area Food Bank released a report that food insecurity is on the rise. 1.2 million people in our region are food insecure. And the two points, and this probably warrants a broader board conversation for a future meeting. But one, a reminder, this is why we formed our COG Farm Policy Committee, and encourage your jurisdictions to participate. That's one of its primary charges, is looking at food insecurity. And a shout out to our partners in Montgomery County. They recently unveiled a new plan to end childhood hunger, where approximately 14% of the area children are food insecure. On fair housing, Hillary Chapman, incredible lead for us on all things housing, has been all around the region, including presenting at the 2023 Fair Housing Leadership Conference, discussing our regional fair housing plan. And last but not least, Nick Ramphos is our Transportation Operations Program Director, and he was, drum roll please, inducted into the inaugural class of the Hall of Fame for the Association of Commuter Transportation Hall of Fame. So that was a conference out in Seattle, and he's been here at COG for 27 years and in the inaugural class for the Hall of Fame. So pretty neat, and if you get a chance, please give Nick a shout out and a congratulations. Thank you, Madam Chair. That ends my report.
Thank you so much for that report and all the work the staff have been doing. Not seeing any questions, I will continue on our agenda. Our next item is to see if do we have any amendments to today's agenda for our meeting. Okay, seeing none, we will proceed. The next item is the approval of minutes from June 14th meeting. Do I have a motion to move that in a second? You can unmute yourself, raise your hand.
So moved, Madam Chair. Approval.
Second, Emmett Jordan, Greenbelt.
I did not, I heard Emmett Jordan, Mayor Jordan seconded. I did not
Second.
hear.
Penny Gross.
Supervisor Gross, okay. Moved it. Any abstentions or nay votes? Nope, not seeing any. All right, then hearing none, the motion passes. Next, we have on our agenda, our consent agenda. You can find this on page 16 of your board packet. We have 6 resolutions on the consent agenda today. There's a lot of exciting projects throughout the region, including an updated community energy strategy implementation for Loudoun County, a climate implementation plan for Prince George's County, development of a regional climate plan, regional hazardous materials detection, and funds to administer the enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities program. May I have a motion to move the consent agenda?
So moved, Madam Chair. Supervisor Bailey.
Seconded by Gross.
By Supervisor
Seconded.
Bailey moved, and a second.
Gross.
Rod. Okay.
Penny Gross seconded. This is harder on when we're virtual. Any abstentions or nay votes on the consent agenda? All right, seeing none, the motion passes. All right, now let's get into the meat of our meeting today. And we're going to continue as we have been over the last couple of months to connect our board and our jurisdictions with what's happening in our federal government, particularly looking for ways that we can increase collaboration. So for our first item today, we're going to hear from Gabe Klein from the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. Mr. Klein is the Executive Director of the office. He's going to brief us on the work of the U.S. Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, and then we can discuss opportunities for collaboration. Mr. Klein, let's see, I think he just said be back in 3 minutes. Is Mr. Klein with us, or? All right, he might have been with us and then might have had to step away for a second. We could take a pause and
Maybe Jeff King, are you with us? Could you maybe talk about an update on COG's EV work for a couple of minutes to give a regional insight?
Sure, absolutely.
all right,
Good,
Jeff, you're up.
good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so we've, as you know, formed a regional electric vehicle working group. They're actually meeting this month as a joint meeting with our Built Environment Energy Advisory Committee, focusing on EV and building codes. We've, through a contract we have through our transportation department, we've engaged a consulting firm, ICF, to help us with the Regional Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Planning Initiative. They are currently working, I think, this week on projections of the number of vehicles we'll see in the region. And I think this next step after that is thinking through an assessment of how many charging stations we'll need across the region, and then close that out with an analysis of where we think the charging station should be located throughout the region. So very detailed level GIS type analysis at the census tract parcel, even down to the parcel level, actually. We know a lot of infrastructure is needed, and really happy to have Gabe with us today to talk about the partnerships and the support we get with the federal government on that. I'm not sure if he's back yet. Looks like he's back. So
Yep,
I'm
I see
back.
Mr. Klein.
Gabe.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. So thank you, Jeff, for that update. And I think Mr. Klein, he just teed you up very nicely. So we're going to turn it over to you.
Great, great. And sorry, I was slightly late. I was early, then I was a little late, but I'm here now. And I know this organization well. I sat on this COG, gosh, 13 years ago. So it has been a while. But for those of you that don't know me, I live in Washington, D.C. I've been in the region about 25 years. And I ran the DC DOT under Adrian Fenty and launched Capital Bike Share, built the streetcar, expanded the circulator bus, and just have a great deal of passion and love for the region, and also a great deal of respect for the COG and how well the MPO works here. I had the luck to work in the DC area and in Chicago. And it's funny, as you travel around the country, you hear sometimes of tension with the MPOs and this and that. And I can tell you that this is a wonderfully functioning organization and has been key to the regionalization of a lot of efforts, ranging from bike share to pay by phone parking, which we also launched back in the day. But today, I'm here to talk to you in a different role. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S. Joint Office of Energy and Transportation, and I'll cover a little bit of about us, but with the majority of the focus here on you and how we can help this region. I don't usually speak to MPOs, but this one is so important to me. And we really think that there's an opportunity for the DC region to be an example, this tri-state area, for regional partnership and coordination, multimodal access to electric vehicles of all types, disadvantaged communities having access, and also being able to create wealth opportunities and jobs. So I'll try to touch on all of this as I go through this. Now, you guys are running the slides on your side, right?
Yes, just
Okay.
say advance whenever you'd like, or forward. Next.
Great. For some bizarre reason, I was thinking I was going to be running them. So let me just reconfigure my screen here. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And as we're going, I don't mind if you stop me and ask me questions, or I'm happy to take them at the end too. It's really up to you all. So this is what we're going to cover today, and I'll try to cover it relatively quickly so we have time for Q&A. And since we started a little bit early, I think we have a little bit of a buffer. But what's the holistic sort of approach here to decarbonization? What's the joint office, and what are we doing, and how can we work with you? What are some of the hot button items, topics that you might want to be aware of coming out of the joint office? And what's next for us that you want to be prepared for? And before I just jump in, I'll give you a very quick overview on us so you have some context. So we were created in the bipartisan infrastructure law. We have a $300 million operating budget, and we see ourselves as a 5-year office. It could be 6 or 7 or 8, we'll see, or it could be ongoing if we get appropriations and there's a feeling amongst our stakeholders that we are really crucial to the success long term of not just electrification, but alternative fuels, various other charges that we have from the secretaries of DOE and DOT. And if it's viewed as a success from the standpoint of bridging the gap, breaking down silos between the Department of Energy and the Department of Transportation, as well as the White House. And we're the first office to be created at the federal level to span multiple agencies. So it's very much an experiment to see if government can work in a different way. And increasingly, energy and transportation are viewed through more of the same lens. They're so intertwined at this point, and they will become more intertwined from a business model standpoint, from a societal standpoint. And so, you know, as the country evolves, as energy and transportation evolve, government is trying to evolve with it. Next slide. Okay, so let's talk about what the federal approach is. Next slide. Basically, what we're seeing is the biggest change in our transportation system in a century, and we're right smack in the middle of it. We had to get a handle on the emissions from coal-fired power plants, from buildings. You know, we've made a ton of progress. Transportation is now the largest emitter of greenhouse gases since, I believe, 2015-16. And that's because we haven't gotten a handle on that. In fact, vehicle miles traveled and so forth keeps expanding. We are in many ways a car-centric society. And so unlike some, you know, older European countries and such, the land use, as many of you know well, can be challenging for us when trying to get control of emissions. So, you know, we need to evolve quite a bit in terms of what modes we use for what use cases, but we also need to zero out the emissions from the vehicles that are going to be operating due to our land use situation, and we can't ignore that. And that's sort of, I think, the lesson here. You know, we have 11 billion tons of freight each year, $35 billion worth of goods each day, and we move people more than 3 trillion vehicle miles. And as much as we would like to relocate everybody right next to their house, that's not going to happen overnight. So we have to take a multi-prong approach, all of government, all of private sector, all of society approach to hit the Paris Climate Accord numbers by 2050 and not go over the 1.5 Celsius increase, which is tough. Next slide. So one of the things that came out earlier this year Not everybody is aware of this, but both our secretaries, Granholm and Buttigieg, announced this, I believe, at TRB. And it's a very powerful document. Part of why it's powerful is its brevity, but it also addresses land use and the need for mode switching. It's not just about converting cars from ICE to EV. And what's also significant about this is it spans not just our two agencies, but EPA and HUD. And we actually are actively working with them on multiple programs. So even though our primary focus is energy and transportation, obviously multi-unit housing, school buses, which live over at EPA, very, very important. And so I would encourage you to go online and Google this and download it. And it can be helpful to you also as you are applying for grants or funding to be aware of this program and to be able to reference it. I think could also be helpful to you. Next slide. As I was saying, transportation is a big issue. Why are we so focused on, retail consumer charging at first? That's because it's half of the issue. Light duty vehicles are half of that 33% in transportation. And then we've got medium and heavy duty vehicles, which does include buses, by the way, and trucks. So, we know that there's a lot of differing solutions to meet these challenges. We need fleets of shared vehicles. We need more urbanites to travel by walking, biking, transit. And we need to increasingly look holistically at vehicles as distributed energy storage systems. And so you might read and hear like, oh my God, can we handle the taxing on the grid of all these electric vehicles? I would argue it's the opposite. Can we create a decentralized virtual power plant-based system without utilizing all of these vehicles? And so you might increasingly hear about vehicle to grid or vehicle to grid integration, smart load management. All of this is speaking to technology and software managing the load that we need by time of day, by type, by use case, all programmable, and then being able to use the vehicles as those energy storage devices so that at peak, we can take the power out of the vehicle and deliver it to people's homes, to their offices, to their businesses. So this is going to be increasingly crucial, and we're actually starting a task force here on vehicle to grid integration and working with utilities, in particular, of all types, to move this forward. Next slide. Some good news. In the US, for every 10 light duty vehicles sold as of early summer, one was an electric vehicle. You look at California, 22%. I don't have figures for this region. I probably could get them. I think DC is relatively high. I don't know about Maryland and Virginia, but I imagine they are as well. But California is now one of the largest electric vehicle markets in the world, which is a great thing. Next slide. Obviously, and you've probably read about this, you need publicly available EV charging infrastructure, even though 85% plus of the charging right now is happening at people's homes. I'm an example. I'm lucky enough to have a driveway. I have a charger in the driveway. A lot of early adopters, had single family homes, could afford to have a charger. Increasingly though, as we're mainstreaming this technology and vehicles are coming down to the $25,000 price point, we need to think much more about people in multi-unit dwellings. We need to make sure that there are chargers available. And so we are working on that with HUD and with states and cities. And we need to make sure that there's access to vehicles, that we are not saying to everybody, you need to go out and purchase, you make a capital investment in your own vehicle. That we have car sharing programs and ride hail programs and bike share programs. And when we talk about, and every mayor I talk to they immediately start out with, well, we're multimodal, we want to have bike charging. And even though many of our grant programs can't fund a bike share station, it can fund all of the ductwork and the transformer and all the things that need to be done to light up that curb for vehicular charging, which can include bike share or scooters or anything else. Let's see, is there anything else significant on this slide? Well, just that we're starting to see a significant ramp. And actually, just in the last week, we've asked the EVSPs, the providers of EV chargers, to update the alternative fuel designated corridor website. And we've seen a 10,000 port increase in the last week. So we're actually approaching, we're starting to eclipse our goal of 160,000 already for this calendar year. And we're seeing that number really ramp on DC fast chargers and level 2 chargers. Next slide. So this will go quick. Next slide, please. So I already talked about this. We have a $300 million operating budget, and a lot of that is for technical assistance. It's also for research with the labs. And we do a tremendous amount of policy work as well. And we have about 40 people at this point. We also have various programs that we support. If you go to the next slide. And we'll talk about those in just a second. But our mission is to accelerate an electrified transportation system that is affordable, convenient, equitable, reliable, and safe. And increasingly, I talk about it being frictionless. It should be easier to charge your car than to go to a gas station and gas up your car. And we have this relentless focus on the consumer. And I will be honest with you, the industry has not had that really over the last, let's say, 13 years. I remember putting the first curbside charging station in the United States in at 14th and U in DC back in 2009, I think. And it's still there, but it's sitting sideways. Somebody's hit it. I don't think the credit card machine's working anymore. And we have a lot of this. And at the end, I'll tell you what we're doing to address that particular issue. But we need to have one system, interoperable, plug and charge, super easy to use. And we're going to get there. That's the good news. And the vision is a future where everyone can drive or ride electric, whether it's on the bus, whether it's on a bike, whether it's in a shared vehicle. Next slide. These are our 4 core programs. The NEVI program, which is $5 billion for states. All 3 jurisdictions here are considered states from the federal government. And just so you know, to build out the basic minimum standard network in the US, which is 450 kilowatt ports every 50 miles on all alternative fuel corridors, we need about 1.5 billion is our estimate. So that leaves 3.5 billion for other types of charging. So the initial rollout is fast chargers, basically on major thoroughfares, highways. We know that the majority of charging in this country will be level 2, will not stress the grid. And my level 2 charger in my driveway puts about 40 miles per hour on my car. Cars sit 95% of the time. So unlike the use case with a gas station, right, where you leave, you got to go find gas somewhere on your way to somewhere, and then you go home, you should be able to charge, I should say, anytime your car is sitting, right? So you're basically topping it up at the Walmart, you're topping it up at your kid's school, at the doctor's office. You have a charger accessible to you where you live, whether it's at the curb or whether it's in the parking lot, or you share a vehicle that's always plugged into a charger, or you ride a bike and you only need to charge once a week. But anyway, that's the NEVI program. That's a 5-year program. We're heading into year 3 of the funding for that program. We've got the CFI program, which is a discretionary grant program, versus NEVI being a formula funding program. So that money just flows to DC, Maryland, and Virginia every year. The discretionary grant program we're in the midst of right now. We had hundreds and hundreds of applications. It was very oversubscribed, which is wonderful. The request ranged from $35,000 to $168 million. I think we had 344 city asks. So we're very excited about this, and the announcements will be later in the fall. This is not limited to just EV like NEVI. You can be hydrogen, natural gas, propane, and we have seen a fair amount of medium duty, heavy duty as well. And there's no reason why a charging station can't serve both, particularly like on a highway or in a rural area, as long as it's got the ability for pull through for a larger vehicle. And then we also support the low-no program at FTA, 5.6 billion, and the school bus program I mentioned at EPA. Next slide. There are some big challenges. As I was saying, we've got a bit of a reliability issue, usability issue with the existing network in this country, and I don't think we should hide that. It was built over 13 years, like the station I put over, or maybe 15 years, like the station I put at 14th and U. And we've got a lot of that early hardware and software that is less reliable. So we're focused on reliability. We have something called the ChargeX Consortium that we've stood up with 40 companies to focus, and 3 national labs to focus on improving the reliability in the existing network over the next 24 months. We're focused on cybersecurity and have been charged by the White House with figuring out the cybersecurity standards and making sure that we partner with all the other agencies to make sure that there's an overarching cybersecurity protocol for the charging network. Interoperability, this is a big one. Some of you have probably seen the announcement that Tesla's opening their chargers to other companies and therefore basically the American public. We worked very hard on that for about 6 months. The positioning publicly that it was somehow like the Biden administration versus Tesla was actually the opposite of the truth. We really facilitated that with them through our minimum standards, which allowed the Tesla port, the NACS port. It is going through an SAE standardization process right now, so it will become a true standard not owned by Tesla. And then companies can decide what they want to spec. But most important, there will be either multiple connectors or adapters at every station, basically, so that no matter what port you have on your car, you will not be left behind. And everything being produced now that's not a Tesla is CCS, including Ford, GM, all these companies that have said they're going to switch to the NACS protocol. And the back end communications and other protocols are all the same between CCS and NACS. So that's going to be seamless. We're also building a, it's called EV Chart, to ingest all of the data from the National Charging Network. And we will be sharing that publicly. And we already have some public data available on our website. Equity is extremely important to us, and we don't think that just putting a charger in somebody's neighborhood is necessarily adequate from an equity standpoint. And that's why we talk a lot about the outcomes, and we work with states and cities to think about the outcome in terms of mobility, right? Because mobility can lead to upward mobility. And then on the supply side, there's obviously equity from a job standpoint or a wealth creation standpoint. So we work on both those issues, and we have something that we've started called the Just Consortium. You can go to our website to learn more, but it's a very data-based way of addressing equity, and we're working with the national labs to provide technical assistance to states and cities based on this data that we are collecting. And then, of course, coordination with utilities. And we've just brought somebody on board who comes from the utility industry and is facilitating those conversations and making sure that the utilities are involved, because unfortunately, in many cases, they're finding out about the needs of states and cities much later than they need to. And then you find out that there's a 5-year delay on a substation or an 18-month delay on a transformer, and it holds everything up. So integrated planning is really, really important. And that basic communication between the utility and the jurisdiction and the private company that's working on this. Next slide. In terms of joint office status updates, next slide, I think, is NEVI. So next slide. This is an example of what a station would look like. And it can have NACs on it or another non-proprietary connector as long as it has CCS. And again, it needs to be 150 kilowatt minimum every 50 miles. Next slide. All 50 states and DC and Puerto Rico, and I'm a little biased. I consider DC a state anyway. That's just me. But they were approved by Federal Highways in September 2022, and we've approved like 49 out of 52 for 2023. So there's $1.5 billion in funding out there now, but there's going to be like another 800 million coming October 1st. And we've got a lot of states that have their RFPs out, and the rest are mostly going to have them out by the end of the year. I was actually on the phone with DC yesterday because they pulled theirs back like last February, and we're talking through how we could help them to get it out as soon as possible while they're ramping up their staffing. Next slide. So yeah, these are just examples of progress being made. Colorado's interesting because they decided, hey, we're just gonna sub-grant it all out to local jurisdictions, basically, to build this network. So, you know, there's a bunch of different approaches here. Recently, we've had announcements from Hawaii, Ohio, Maine, Colorado, Pennsylvania. So lots of great work out there. And on our website, you can find a lot of information about how these different states are tackling this, and use benchmarks for your areas as well. Next slide. In terms of the CFI discretionary program, next slide. There were $700 million in FY22 and 23 funding for right now. So that period closed June 13th. There's half of the money is divided for corridor grant programs and half for community. So corridor would be sort of supplemental to the NEVI initial tranche of funds, right? More highway focused, can have hydrogen, so on and so forth. The community grant program is really like cities and towns. And so we're getting very different types of applications for both. And I would say many more communities. There's a lot of demand for that. Next slide. The corridor program for this tranche, total funding 350 million, has to be on a designated alternative fuel corridor. It has to be either EV charging within 1 mile or alternative fuels within 5 miles of the corridor. Has to be publicly accessible. This is important. So basically, you can put chargers on private property as long as they are publicly accessible 24 hours a day. So if it's gated and you have to pay to get behind the gate, that would not qualify. But as long as everybody has access to it, then that would qualify. There's a Justice 40 requirement, and it has to meet ADA accessibility. Next slide. On the community side, you'll see that the minimum award, excuse me, is 500,000. So it's much smaller. So you can do basically micro grants. Again, publicly accessible. You may use the funds to contract with a private entity. On the corridor side, you must use it. And let's be honest, the national network is going to be built by many different private companies on public and private property. And this is expected to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and fill gaps in publicly accessible infrastructure. Next slide. These are the eligible entities. So it needs to be a public entity. Often, though, they are supported by a private company on the application. There are often CBOs, transit agencies. So it can be a consortium. but it needs to be led by a public entity, including an MPO, which we think is excellent from a regional standpoint. Next slide. So we do have our own, we've taken some of our $300 million and we have taken it from operating budget and moved it into funding opportunity budget because we could. And we wanted to seed some interesting ideas. So next slide. We have a FOA out right now. We actually have received the applications. So we've got a resiliency component, an equity component with workforce. We've got some great applications there. And then improving reliability and performance. And actually back to equitable access, the community-driven models for electric vehicle charging deployment focused very much on access and getting utilities, private companies, mobility companies, et cetera, and cities to work together to deploy multimodal charging solutions and outcomes for people. Next slide. And so basically we are in the review mode right now for both of those, and you should see announcements later this fall. Next slide. And then a couple more slides left. Next slide. What we're focused on right now at the Joint Office, progressing that NEVI program, heading into year 3 of funding. We have an EV working group that we've announced that was also in the bipartisan infrastructure law. That's on our website. You can see who's on the EV working group. The first meeting will be late September. We'll be announcing our selections for both of those grant opportunity programs. And breaking news, this morning we launched the 10% set aside program. And actually, I don't think you're going to have this slide because I stuck it on my deck. But if you go to our Joint Office of Energy and Transportation website, which is driveelectric.gov, or you can go to rideelectric.gov and hit the news page, you can actually pull up the alert from about an hour and a half ago. And we have $100 million in funding available for repair and replace of those stations, like the one at 14th and U. In fact, that one is in the list. So we're using the temporarily unavailable charger list in the alternative fuel corridor data set. We are encouraging for the next 30 days all the companies out there and governments to report all the broken chargers, and then they'll be eligible. And basically, we should be able to pay for every single one in the United States to be replaced. So very exciting. Please, please, please apply. Next slide. I think almost last slide. So the reason I put this up is that a lot of times people say, hey, just like send us this, contact request form on our website. We have 22 people behind this form, consultants, national lab folks that are here to answer questions within 48 hours, or at least get you an initial response. And so whatever the question is around alternative fuels, electric vehicle charging, or you just have a general question you can't figure out between DOT and DOE who would have the answer, message us and we will get you a response. Thanks for listening. I talked more than I planned. Sorry.
That's all right. Thank you, Mr. Klein. This is a great information that you shared with us, and appreciate the breaking news today. Colleagues, if you have any questions or comments, you can raise your hand, unmute yourself, put it in chat. I do want to notice that Jeff King has been putting, and Conte and other staff have been putting some notes in the chat. I see, I'll turn it first to our Vice Chair, Alan.
Thanks, Gabe. Great to see you again. I know
See you.
the amount of the work you're doing obviously is thinking through how you get the dollars out the door. Just if you wanted to opine briefly, being somebody who's come from local government, as local governments need to think about the policies we put in place that then help make maximum advantage of the funding. For example, in the district we're wrestling with, while we need to create publicly accessible EV charging, does that mean on the curbside in a residential neighborhood and dedicating that public space? Does it mean publicly accessible at all your rec centers, libraries, and schools? Any kind of best practices or just things you've seen from other jurisdictions as you wrestle with the use of public space and dedication of it to then creating that EV charging infrastructure?
Yeah. Because I know this group well, like I'm going to be just really honest with you. Like there's a fair amount of experimentation that needs to happen. And it's pretty context sensitive. New York, LA have done some really interesting experimentation around curbside charging, particularly pole-based charging. The nice thing about that is it's relatively inexpensive. You can get it in pretty quickly. Again, not a big strain on the grid. We are looking at curbside charging from the standpoint of commercial districts, but also residential. I think that having some curbside charging available is going to be important. I know that DDOT, has been a little resistant to it, particularly with the conflicts with bike lanes and such, but it can be done. I mean, one nice thing about the European system is that everybody brings their own cords. You can literally just put a plug at the curb and people bring their own cord and plug it in. Here, that's not yet how we're doing things. So thinking about how that cord works and the retractable nature of it and coordination with bike facilities and so forth is important. But I do think that jurisdictions should have some curbside charging. There's obviously in many cities a lot of available space off street, although I would say increasingly less. Like surface lots are not, what they once were. And then one of the things Anna Chamberlain told me yesterday when I talked to her at DDOT is like, hey, like we'd like to convert gas stations over to electric charging plazas. And I said, yes, that's a wonderful idea. In fact, why not make them big multimodal hubs, particularly the ones that are sort of in the urban core? So, thinking about that multimodalism also, and like, how do you take an area like the Revel lot in Brooklands, and say, hey, we could be charging scooters, bikes, people's phones, cars, ride-hail vehicles, etc. Right? In terms of benchmarks, I do think LA and New York, and New York has a great electrification roadmap that I would check out. Also, Portland's got an interesting program, a permit-based program now, where any company can come to the city and start putting chargers up with a permit, and they can put them in public space. And then I will say I met with Pepco actually before I took this job, and they seem to really want to do some innovative work in this space. And I think they have some funding. So it might be interesting to see how the utility would partner, whether it was on street or off street, and what their ideas are. And the last thing I'll say is I've been trying to get to Europe since I got this job, because really they're doing some amazing things. And I've been just too busy, but I do think a trip over to Europe is in the offing. And if anybody would be interested in going, let me know. I don't know how soon it'll be, but whether it's going to Brussels and meeting with the EU energy and transportation offices, or seeing what they're doing in Amsterdam with curbside, there's some great examples over there, even in UK, particularly in London.
If you twist my arm, I'll go to Brussels with you.
I know.
Yes.
You might be getting a lot of emails after the meeting.
Thanks, Gabe.
Yes.
Yeah, I just want to know before I turn it over to Senator Feldman that if folks are interested in facilitating a gasoline station to an EV station, we actually have one in the city of Tacoma Park in Montgomery County. The mayor of Tacoma Park is on the call, and the city and state work together to help an independent station owner convert from gas to EV a couple of years ago. Actually, Secretary Buttigieg actually came out to see it a while ago. So that was
wonderful. That's great.
Yeah, so happy to dig into that at another point. But we're coming to the close on this, and I see I have Senator Feldman and then Vice Mayor Snyder. So first I'll turn it to Senator Feldman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Gabe, that was excellent. Just context, I chair the committee in our state Senate in Maryland, deals with all these issues, energy, EV. We did some good stuff, I think, this session, including working on a pilot with Pepco and some others to get into those multi-dwelling unit. That has been a challenge. Tomorrow, I'm actually on a legislative panel at the Cambridge Hyatt on the Eastern Shore with the DC Maryland Utility Association. And so this is timely for me to be doing that tomorrow. But yesterday, I took my committee to Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, to PJM headquarters. And we talked, and PJM is the 13th, the transmission operator that controls electricity in the 13 states. That includes Virginia, DC, and Maryland. And they were, and the reason I bring this up, because as we go through all these policies on electrification, and I am sure you talk to FERC and probably the PJM folks, one of the things that they cautioned us big time as we move to an electrified world, including what we're talking about here today, was I brought up, we have 2 coal-fired power plants at Maryland that would like to close as we do the energy transition towards everything we're talking about. It's Brandon Shores is specific. And PJM has specifically told the operator there, the private sector operator, that you can't do that. Well, we can't order you to not do it. We're just telling you that if you were to close those power plants prior to 2028, we don't have capacity to fill the void in terms of the electric grid, and that the Baltimore region of our state would be out of power for 2 or 3 years. And so I have to bring that up because we've done some bold things in Maryland in terms of electrifying our buildings, very, very broad goals. And I do feel like sometimes there's lip service. Everybody's concerned about capacity. Can the grid hold it? But if you would have heard the PJM guys just yesterday, we walked away a little bit shell-shocked, to be quite candid with you. And so I have to put that out there because it's fresh in my mind from the trip up to Valley Forge yesterday. And so.
Well, one thing I'll say, there's a great article in the New York Times, maybe it was 2 months ago, and it was about Norway. And Norway is about the size of South Carolina, so I'm aware of that. We're like, with 50 states, we're like 50 European countries. But they're very intelligent on energy and transportation. They're very multimodal. And as they were switching over to electric, and by the way, 80% of their sales are electric vehicles now. They were very concerned about overtaxing the grid. And what happened was they started switching over pretty rapidly, and it just never came to be. Now, think about this. When refrigeration came online in like the 20s and 30s, we had the same fears. And there was a little bit of strain. When air conditioning came online in the early 60s, we had some of these same fears. And honestly, like Florida wouldn't even be where it is. Like there would be no Florida basically without air conditioning. It never would have been developed at scale. So I guess what I'm saying is like, if we build it, we'll sort of figure it out, right? And now there are bigger issues in what you're talking about. And that is like, when are we going to have the renewable capacity to switch over from coal-fired power plants, right? That's a bigger issue. That's something that the Department of Energy is working on, and the National Renewable Energy Lab on a daily basis. But what I'm not convinced of, I think there's a lot of hype, is that 85% of our charging being level 2 charging, which is like a 240 volt outlet, that's really going to put a strain on the grid. I think that now when you get 10 fast chargers, megawatt fast chargers for trucks together in one place, that's a whole different ballgame. And then you're talking about using like the amount of power that RFK uses when it has a game going, that's different. But the majority of the charging in the district will be level 2 charging. Most of Southern Maryland and Northern Virginia outside of the highways. And I don't think it's going to be a significant strain, but we'll monitor it as we go.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Our last question or comment on this before we turn to our next panel, Vice Mayor Snyder.
Thanks a lot, Madam Chair. I would just like to follow up on this idea of how we invest and support the private sector. And I think the case in point that you raised about how to get the gas stations to add this capability, because while government can do some of this at the early days, we really need to have the private sector take it on. So maybe the next presentation ought to be how we get that transition done. Thank you.
Yeah, and we have somebody on our team, Kevin George Miller. He's our head of business models and finance and comes from ChargePoint. 7 years at ChargePoint running public policy, but also was the CFO for the state of Massachusetts for sustainability for all of those offices, has a public and private background like myself, and is very focused on how we seed the private sector to do what we need. Because very much like this funding that we're talking about, the $7.5 billion, we're going to need 50 to 90 billion. So obviously we're just seeding this network and we're making sure there's minimum standards in place. So as it all gets built, the consumer is at the center of it. Everybody's protected. The taxpayer dollars are protected. But you're absolutely right. And so if you want like Kevin to come back and talk to you about some of the private sector facilitation we're doing and where we think things are heading, we're working on a project with McKinsey right now and where we think these business models are heading. Be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Terrific. Well, that was a great presentation. We appreciate it. I appreciate all the questions and comments from my colleagues. And there was also a robust conversation happening in the chat and good information being shared that will make sure it gets out to everyone after the meeting. Mr. Klein, thank you so much for being here today and sharing this information. We look forward to continuing the work together.
Thank you so much. Great to see all of you.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is we're going to focus on solar initiatives to meet our regional climate goals. We're going to be briefed on solar energy initiatives from around the region. The Metropolitan Washington 2030 Climate and Energy Action Plan identifies clean energy deployment as a key action to meeting our regional greenhouse gas reduction goals of 50% by 2030. On today's panel, we're going to have the Montgomery County Green Bank, the District of Columbia Sustainable Energy Utility Solar for All program, and the Northern Virginia Regional Commission Solarized Nova program. And first, I'm going to turn it over to COG's Climate, Energy, and Air Program Director, Jeff King, so he can talk to us about our current work to accelerate action on meeting our 2030 climate goals. Jeff?
Thank you, Chair Stewart. And if I may take just a couple seconds here to respond to Dave Snyder's point. One thing we learned when we organized our effort on the CFI EV charging grant is that these federal opportunities require a competitive process to secure those private sector partners. And given the timing, we really didn't have the ability to work that system. But moving forward, particularly on some of these new grant opportunities, including the recent climate pollution reduction grant, we are actively looking at doing some sort of competitive solicitation through COG so that we can actually establish those private sector partnerships in advance and then together approach the federal government for that funding. So just wanted to flag that. Definitely something we're aware of and working on. So to the issue here of solar, stepping back, the board asked COG, you may recall, asked COG to identify what actions the board can take to support accelerating action on climate. And when we made that presentation to the board, three major priorities were identified. One was electric vehicles. The other was committing and moving towards 100% renewables. And the last was to support and advance the concept of building energy benchmarking and building energy performance standards. You recall last year, the board started with prioritizing EVs. That work, as you're aware, is now progressing through our regional EV work group, the Information Clearinghouse, and the TPP-funded regional EV plan. But to meet our 2030 climate goals that were adopted by the board, 50% reduction by 2030, it's really clear that the region's going to need to go big on renewables. The 2030 plan assessed that the region would probably need on the order of 250,000 solar rooftops by 2030, and currently we have around 70,000. So we're making great progress, but much more to do. And our thinking is the time to go big on this is now. There's substantial federal funding available in the next year to assist in deploying solar energy across the entire region. It's really a key opportunity to accelerate action on climate. So today, as you heard, the board will be hearing about 3 regional examples of utilizing solar energy in the region. After the presentation, staff, we're happy to support the board discussion on how to future accelerate the deployment of solar energy across the region. So with that, I turn it back over to you, Chair Stewart.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And I love the idea of, as we listen to these presentations, to keep in mind about how we can go big on renewables, what we can take away from the examples we'll hear about in a moment, and move forward to put some things into action. So with that, I'm going to turn to our first panelist, Montgomery County Green Bank Senior Director of Commercial Business and Investments, Rokas Berasanovas, is with us, and he's going to talk about the Seneca Village Solar Project. And turn it over
Thank you, Kate. Do we have a slide deck? There you go.
Yeah.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for introduction, and thank you so much for having us and allowing us to showcase our most recent solar project in Montgomery County. Before diving into the case study, I would like to just take a minute to refresh everyone on who we are and what we do. So if we go to the next slide. So Montgomery County Green Bank is 501c3 nonprofit chartered by Montgomery County. It operates independently with an 11-member board, including 2 county representatives. The Green Bank is funded by 10% of the county's annual energy fuel tax, as per legislation passed on February of last year. Its primary goal is to accelerate investment in energy efficiency and renewable energy, with a focus on fostering a diverse, equitable, and inclusive community that is both resilient and sustainable. This initiative aligns with Montgomery County's ambition in the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions to 0% by 2035. The Green Bank's target is to leverage its funds to attract private capital at a ratio of about 4:1, thereby magnifying the impact of its investments in the pursuit of a more sustainable and environmentally friendly future for Montgomery County. If you go to the next slide, this is a pretty cool slide. On the bottom, you can see our impact thus far in the county. And on the map, each green dot represents a project that we have done so far in Montgomery County. Next slide. So this is our project that we want to highlight today. Seneca Village Apartments, which is located in Gaithersburg, Maryland, right off the 270. It is a very large property divided into 2, separated by a creek, and in the picture you can see the north and south locations. The property consists of 58 buildings and has 684 units, of which 90% are affordable. And the property is also located in an equity emphasis area as well. Next slide. So the project cost, the total project cost was about $11.5 million, and that included new high efficiency roofs with a reflecting coating on all 58 buildings, as well as almost 2.2 megawatt rooftop solar arrays, as you can see in the picture. Sponsor also added an EV charging infrastructure as well. I want to note that the sponsor was introduced to us, to the Green Bank, by our colleagues at DHCA. As for the impact, sponsor will save over 2.5 million kilowatt hours of energy and over $300,000 on annual basis. This also mitigates 2,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions on annual basis as well. Next slide. So what type of support did Green Bank provide? Initially, we provided technical assistance by subsidizing some of the feasibility study work, and we structured financing for $7.5 million because that is what the borrower needed for this project. Initially, we underwrote $5 million loan. We pulled in our partners and sold a portion to New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation and Virginia Community Capital. And then we sourced an additional $2.5 million from our partners at the Inclusive Prosperity Capital. So this shows our leverage, our ability to leverage, and our ability to pull in investments from all over the nation. Next slide. And with that great picture, I want to thank you again for having us, and I'll be happy to answer any questions after the panel.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Now we're going to turn it over to DC Sustainable Energy Utility Solar Program Portfolio Manager, James Clark, to talk to us about the Solar for All program.
Good afternoon, everybody, and apologies for a bit of the background noise. Our externs are currently graduating. I am the portfolio manager for the Solar for All program here with the DCSEU. Next slide, please. I am joined by Josh Wink, our associate program manager here at the DCSEU, who will be going back and forth with me on some of these slides. A little bit about the DCSEU. We're a community-minded organization that since 2011 have been working to help DC residents and businesses generate more than $1.2 billion in lifetime energy cost savings. We provide the industry leading learning opportunities, expert hands-on assistance, and vital financial support to save our communities both energy and money. And we do quite a bit of extern training as well, as you can hear from the background. Next slide, please. So just a little bit on our goals. We strive to seek combined source energy savings and measured in MMBTU, greenhouse gas savings, local economic development, low-income spending, deep energy retrofits, and renewables with electric energy and green jobs as well. So next slide, I am just going to focus on the Solar for All part here. So Josh, let's take it away on this one.
Yeah, so pictured here is the Rock Creek Forward Solar Shingles project. This is, I believe, an FY20, FY21 project that we completed. It's 22 kilowatts and is the first solar shingles project that is a CREF in the district, and these solar shingles last longer than typical roof shingles do, so it not only creates energy savings for the property owner, but also allows them to not have to re-roof as frequently. Next slide, please. I think this is back to you, James.
Yeah, so the Solar for All initiative is Mario Bowser's initiative to bring benefits to solar energy to 100,000 income qualified DC residents by 2032. That was set back in 2017. The DCSU and DOEE, DC's Department of Energy and Environment, are working with local solar developers to design and install solar photovoltaic systems to provide income qualified DC homeowners and residents with solar energy savings. These systems have the potential to offset electricity costs by as much as $500 each year for residents, saving DC families money for at least 15 years. And that's per project. Next slide, please. This is our current DCSEU team. You can see myself, Antoine, our program manager for low-income single-family projects, Josh, who is our associate program manager with CREF, our inspectors, a couple interns, and the like. All the names are listed on the right. Next slide, please. This is an overview on the projects that we've done since we started on the current SFA project or program in 2019. We've targeted single family homes at 100 per year. Currently, we're targeting 200 this year, actually, up from that 175 metric. And on the community renewable energy facilities, CREF projects, we've done an increasing capacity in megawatts per year, but these projects take a little bit of time to get finished. So that 3.1 megawatts for 2023 is to date. We do plan on exceeding last year's total, and the total for the past 5 years is around 35 megawatts of capacity, with each homeowner needing around 3.5 kilowatts. So doing the math, that will show our impact. If we can go to the next slide, please. All right, Josh.
All right, so yeah, I'll take over from here. As James stated at the start, my name is Josh Wink. I'm the Associate Program Manager in charge of the CREF program at the DCSEU. And we can just go to the next slide. So yeah, just very, very brief overview here. Community solar, which is what the CREF program is, that's just the DC specific term for community solar. is, any solar project where the benefits of the solar go to multiple customers. For our program, all of the benefits go to low to moderate income households in the district. So this normally, people sign up for this program instead of single family if they can't install solar on their roof, if they live in a multifamily building, if their roof, just doesn't have the capability to hold solar, they subscribe to this program instead. And 3.5 kilowatts of every community solar system goes to one subscriber. So, our Solar for All program is one of the most successful in the country. In 2023, earlier this year, we were awarded the DOE's Sunny Awards for Equitable Community Solar. 3 projects were awarded, 2 programs. We were one of those 2 programs that won the award. And pictured here is Secretary Jennifer Granholm, Secretary of Energy, speaking at our DC Water Brentwood Reservoir site, which is a 1.8 megawatt site in Northeast DC that serves over 500 homes, that will serve over 500 homes once it's turned on next month. Secretary Granholm came out to this site after we won the award in order to announce over $8 billion worth of funding jointly between DOE and EPA for community solar nationwide. We can go to the next slide, please. So just a brief overview of our program. Subcontractors install the solar projects, and 100% of the electricity at those projects is designated to the DC Department of Energy and the Environment, who then works with PEPCO to distribute that electricity to low to moderate income households in the district. All projects have 4 key milestones that they must meet. The first milestone is not tied to payment, but the next 3 are. And we find that this keeps our developers on track to completing these projects in the fiscal year cycle, which we recognize is pretty tight for a lot of contractors. Giving people 9 months to complete a project is tough. So having these milestone setups helps keep them on track for that. And yeah, as mentioned before, they have to designate this electricity for 15 years, but also they need to make sure that the sites continue to produce for 15 years at least 90% of the weather adjusted expected annual output. And we monitor this as well. And if they fall below that 90% threshold, we have things in place in our contract to claw back some of those incentive funds that we pay out. You can do the next slide, please. And so these are 3 of the more notable community solar sites in DC. On the left is the Children's National Research and Innovation Campus at Walter Reed. That's a 1.1 megawatt project and is the largest canopy project in the district. In the middle is the Rock Creek Forge shingle system, which earlier there was a picture of it being constructed. This is what it looks like fully completed, 21 kilowatts. As mentioned, that's probably the smallest CREF that we have, but it's pretty innovative in its use of the solar shingles for the homeowner. And on the right is the Brentwood Water Reservoir, which is a 1.8 megawatt system. It's the largest one in our portfolio, and it is the site pictured with Jennifer Granholm, with Secretary Granholm, earlier. Next slide, please. And yeah, this is a quote from Lem Walker, who's the Community Association president of Fairfax Village, which is a set of, I want to say, 10 condos in South DC that we worked with Flywheel Development to install CREFs on basically all the roofs, except for one of those buildings, which didn't have a suitable roof over the course of 3 years. So there's, I want to say, 17 separate CREFs on that property. And we've been able to work with the community association president there to get as many low to moderate income household residents in that area sign up for the CREF program. So not only do they have the solar on their roofs, they're actually the ones seeing the direct benefits of that solar. If we could go to the next slide, please. And I'll pass it back to James to discuss the single family.
Thank you, Josh. And yeah, this is just a couple more slides here. Our single family solar program. If you can go to the next slide. So our single family solar program, it's for up to 5 kilowatt projects installed for at least 20 years, with all the electricity being used on site for those 20 years. Our developers are expected to maintain these sites as need be. Qualified residents who need roof repair or a heavy up, increasing the amperage and airing the house, can receive assistance on this. So single family solar production requirements include that the subcontractors have to design, install, and interconnect each solar system as a residential net metering system. The subcontractors have to provide 100% of the solar electrical output at no cost to the homeowner and guarantee performance from 20 years of the interconnection, including one free removal and reinstallation for roof work during that 20-year term, removal and buyout and other options at the end of the 20-year term, labor installation and manufacturer's warranties for at least 20 years. And if we can go to the next slide. This is a quote from one of our single-family Solar for All participants, Sylvie. It's really solar for all. It's really for everyone, no matter where you come from. One thing that I will add that wasn't shown here is that we are doing a pilot program this year, a number of battery installations to increase grid resilience on the single-family side. We do have one CREF project where there's a battery being installed after the meter to ensure that everything's going back to the grid on a VCREF. We do look to expand these programs in future years so that we can continue to help DC with grid resilience in addition to the low-income single-family residents that we are assisting and also helping achieve a green DC. And yes, we're happy to take any questions after the presentation. I think that's the end of our slides, but you can shift to the next. Thank you very much, everyone.
Great. Thank you, James and Josh. And so for our final presenter today, we have Mr. Lazo, and he's going to focus on wait, I lost Mr. Lazo here. Sorry. Our last presenter is from the Northern Virginia Regional Commission. He's the executive director, and he's going to talk about Solarized Nova program. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Lazo.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm Bob Lucero, Executive Director of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, and thank you for this opportunity. Next slide, please. First and foremost, I want to thank all of the Northern Virginia members that are on this call, because all of our local government members have been strong supporters of the Solarized Nova program since it was instituted in 2014. Essentially, Solarized Nova provides a one-stop shop for consumers to take advantage of reduced pricing through bulk purchasing. For many solar installers, the soft costs, permitting, staff, engineering, etc., are quite expensive as part of a per watt cost. So we are able to bring the customer to the installer. As you see in Q4 of 2022, the national cost of residential solar was $3.30 per watt. Our Solarized Nova program was $2.45 a watt for a 5 to 10 kilowatt system. And this year, the cost per watt in the Commonwealth is $3.01, and our Solarized was at $2.67, an 11% reduction compared to the statewide cost. NVRC has partnered with the Local Energy Alliance program, who administers the program, and they issue an RFP to procure the service of local installers. And it is then our local government partners who help market the program through various social media, e-newsletter channels, etc. And this program helps our local governments meet their climate goals that have been set. Next slide, please. As you can see, the number of contracts over the years in the kilowatts have increased each year. We're up to 690 contracts, 6.2 megawatts, and nearly $18 million in private sector investment. The slide has a live link to a map where you can see all the Solarized projects by zip code. Next slide, please. So far, our preliminary data for this year, the contracts, they're still crunching the numbers. The contracts are coming in, but 145 contracts. They expect it to be closer to 200, $4.3 million in private sector investment. And what's really nice to see is the size of the systems over the year. Because of the reduction in cost and the 30% investment tax credit, the system sizes are getting larger. On average, they're about 10 kilowatts per system. Next slide, please. The energy and other impacts of the program is these solar arrays through 2022 generate 8.4 million kilowatts of clean renewable energy each year. It reduces 6,607 tons of CO2 annually. 9.4% of all new solar arrays in Northern Virginia from 2014 to 2021 were the result of this program. That's literally 1 in 10 new solar arrays in that time period were the result of Solarized Nova. and it supports local contractors and jobs in the region. And one of our installers, who has offices on both sides of the river, told me just recently, 4 years ago, they had 100 employees. Now they have over 300 employees. And starting salary for someone who has no experience is $17 an hour. So they're doing quite well in helping create jobs, and some of their installers are making six-figure salaries. Next slide, please. One of the neat things we did, and thank you to COG for the grant to assist us with NVRC software upgrade 7 years ago. We have a unique map in the Commonwealth where you can click on any house, any building, to determine how large of an array can fit on your roof, what's the electricity savings, and the annual CO2 averted. It's a nice tool to have, and it's an opportunity for the homeowner or business owner to have a beginning understanding of what a solar array can do for their business or their home. And I would just say, you know, here in Virginia, in Northern Virginia in 2009, there were only 51 solar arrays. In 2021, there were more than 5,800. Certainly, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and other things have made solar significantly more attractive in Virginia. And with that, I'll stop because I know you're on a time crunch. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Before I turn over to everyone, I think Chair Randall did have a question. I think this is for James and Josh in DC on what type of roof is suitable, and can a non-suitable roof be retrofitted?
That's a great question. And so, yes, we do retrofits on roofs for low-income single-family households. We have a budget that's set aside for that, as well as heavy ups for other areas where our residents would not otherwise qualify. And we do evaluate those projects on a case-by-case basis. But excellent question.
Thank you. So now I want to open it up and kind of give us a framework for thinking about our discussion over like the next 10 minutes or so. And think about, because we have CEPC, our Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee, and we just heard three great examples of the work that's happening in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And as Jeff King set us up to think big on renewables when we started this, I want to put before us this afternoon to see what everyone thinks about asking CEPC, our committee, to explore three areas. One would be moving to get all our jurisdictions to install solar systems on government facilities, including schools. The second would be explore how more of our COG members can go to 100% renewable when it comes to purchasing energy. And the third is setting a new aggressive regional goal for solar rooftop deployment. And so we can ask questions of the panelists, but I wanted to, in the spirit of going big on renewables and thinking about how we can come out of this discussion with something to bring back to our committee, wanted to lay out those three areas as potential areas to ask CEPC to come back to us on steps on how we can move that forward. We just want to see what folks thought about that and open it up for about the next 10 minutes. Vice Chair Allen.
Thanks. Well, first off, thanks to everybody who presented as well. And Madam Chair, appreciate you leading this conversation. And Jeff, great work as always on the COG side too. I love the idea of laying out kind of three fairly specific type of goals for us to achieve. I can say in the district, you know, on the solar installation side, I mean, I think for all government, it's kind of a huge missed opportunity if we're not seeing, while, you know, if we're making a big investment in rebuilding a school or rebuilding a rec center or something large, it's not just enough to make it solar ready. It should be solar installed for that rooftop. On purchasing energy, I'd say this is a space where I think the district's done a really great job. The council and the mayor have really tried to partner closely on this one, and the mayor's office has done a really great job of being able to sign deals that get to renewable energy purchases. And so I think that's, again, leveraging the power of your government. has been something that's worked really well. And then of course the solar installation on your rooftops. In DC at least, I have a lot of flat roofs all over the place. So it does kind of lend itself to being able to kind of create that rooftop solar. And that may not be the case in every other space, but I hope everyone also will see the map that in the Solar for All program that got shown. It's the same map we all see every single time, right? And one of the things the Solar for All program really worked on intentionality. You saw basically every rooftop solar installation was on the eastern half of our city. So keeping equity in mind, really thinking about who needs that type of support from government really plays out in that map. And I think it's one we should be proud of, that it's really put the emphasis and energy around where we can make that transitional. So I love the idea of kind of calling on all of us and challenging all of us with kind of 3 concrete goals. And I think these are 3 good ones to pick. So I appreciate it and encourage us to support that.
Thank you, Charles. Any other comments or thoughts? Yes, Penny, Supervisor Gross. Yeah.
Thank you. I really like the idea of the solar on rooftops. There are a couple of things that come to mind. One is that I'm a member of the Northern Virginia Regional Commission, and it's been remarkable to see how the solar has grown. But I also remember going to a meeting, the Fairfax County Government Center, where we were trying to, explain to people what solar was all about. And the room was jam-packed with people who were interested. Those kinds of public meetings, I think, may still be valuable because there's still a lot of people who are wondering whether solar is right for them. But we did have some challenges in Fairfax County about doing solar on school rooftops. We have a program that we're going to be doing solar on, even on the building that I'm in right now. When it gets renovated, there will be a solar. But we found that in some cases, the rooftops, the school rooftops, there were some problems. It may have been a contractor problem, it may have been a school problem, but it's not automatic. Everybody thinks, oh, this is great, of course we can do it. There are a lot of steps, and I don't know if maybe any of our presenters have had any experience on this, but you start going down the road, and then all of a sudden you hit a roadblock, and it's a big disappointment because you've really oversold the program and now are not able to do it in the time frame you want to. So maybe somebody could address that kind of situation. Thank you.
Thanks for raising that. I don't know if any of our panelists have a question, or Jeff, if you have any reactions to that. I think that is something that CPC could look at as we ask them to do these, both the opportunities and challenges.
If I could, Madam Chair, this is Bob Rotero. I mean, every roof is different. I mean, and we tell everyone when they look at the solar map, nothing takes the place of a case-by-case basis. But I think a lot of people would be surprised. Loudoun County has more schools with solar than any school system in Northern Virginia. It's 14 schools. 15% of their school children are in schools that are served by solar. And every new school building that they're building now will have solar arrays as part of the contract. I mean, that's what they have done. Arlington County has 2 net zero schools, a third on the way. They're building things with solar in mind. So with respect to Fairfax County Public Schools, it's a case-by-case basis. You're going to have some older buildings as opposed to new. But I think that it's by example. Fairfax County General Government's doing a lot of good things by example with respect to solar, and they just the school system needs a little encouragement from their school board colleagues.
Okay.
So, Chair Stewart, a couple of points. The EPA Green Power Partnership quite a few years ago approached COG about the notion of cooperative procurement of solar. And we actually have the Solarize program is the most recent example of kind of working together. A lot of that type of work actually started here in the district with the Mount Pleasant Solar Co-op. I like to call it the kind of the Tupperware party for solar. getting a group of citizens together in a neighborhood to kind of work through that whole process together really helps, develop that personal capacity and interest to want to do it. I think similarly, we've tried to do that multi-party approach here in the region. The big success story of that was the technical assistance provided. I think at the time we put boots on the roof of something like 170 different sites, and including a bunch of metro facilities, a bunch of facilities in Montgomery County, that ultimately led to actually Montgomery County doing some great work on deploying solar. It took WMATA quite some time to finally get the direction and leadership to do it, and they've now started putting some of the solar on. I did have a conversation yesterday with staff in City of Falls Church. When I talked to him about this, he actually revived the notion of, hey, can we work together? Why would we want to do this one-off each time? If Bob Lazzaro's program can get that type of cost savings, why can't City of Falls Church and Fairfax work together? So, that's something to keep in mind. The one other point on the bigger renewable piece of procuring renewable energy at scale for your government ops, clearly the district, Montgomery County, Arlington are great examples that we can learn from on how to go about doing that. Folks should be aware in Virginia, there's an interesting opportunity that's being explored by a number of jurisdictions, Arlington, City of Fairfax, City of Blacksburg, looking at the opportunity to work through the VEPCA contract process to have that contracting vehicle for power also address renewables. Historically, I think it's focused on lowest cost, but there are staff looking into, can that be done for renewables? So a lot of great opportunities, and I appreciate your focus on this today.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Let's see, I see Chair Randall.
Yeah, so first I apologize. I'm not sure why I cannot get my camera to work, and so I'm not on camera, and I apologize for that. I do want to give just a really special thank you to Mr. Lazzaro, who I will tell you, when you are elected to office in Virginia, like you hug your spouse and then you get a call from Mr. Lazzaro about the solar program. He's right there on you, telling you about it, and really guiding the counties through how to sign up and what to do. And so he's done a great job. I also want to say that in Loudoun, one thing we're doing is trying to put solar on all of our attainable, affordable homes as they're being built. So as we're building new homes, be it through the county or the Habitat for Humanity or whomever else, we're putting solar on there at that moment because we know that it would lower electricity costs for those families later on. And so it's not just, of course, for the sustainability and being forward thinking, but it's also for the finances for people who may be moving in an attainable home or into our ADU program, and it's working really well.
Thank you, Chair Randall, for bringing this up. And I think, when we're looking at asking CFC to come back with some recommendations, the third point, setting a new aggressive regional goal for solar rooftop deployment. I think the only way we're going to move forward on that is doing these partnerships with our housing programs. So I
Thank you.
Appreciate that point as well. Supervisor Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Chair Randall is right. Bob Lazzaro just gets us when we get sworn in, and he says, "Okay, solar, go for it." But I'm very appreciative for this presentation. Prince William County was able to incorporate a resolution to move forward with this opportunity with solar, and as well as introduce it to our schools as well. And it has just opened up a whole new partnership and relationship within the county. As it relates to solar, and it took us I'd say about 2 years to get it finally done. When you say Bob, by the nod, yeah, but it is essential. Also, it's a component that has afforded us as supervisors an opportunity to talk about with the developers as well as it relates to sustainability. So just another arm, if you will, in moving forward and making sure that environmental and sustainability component is essential. But the solar piece has been very key in opening up a lot more of relationships, if you will, within the community and educating the community as well. So Thanks, Bob, for today.
You're welcome. If I could say something, Madam Chair, I mean, in Prince William County, the school system announced 14 schools were going to go solar with a PPA, and then there were some unreasonable regulations put in place by Dominion Energy. There was litigation. I'm sure Jeff could give you chapter and verse. The SEC said that Dominion Energy could not make these requirements that were making these projects not attractive from a financial standpoint. But there's two things I think would be helpful for the region is getting some a briefing on direct pay. That's a new opportunity for local government and houses of worship, not-for-profits, to take advantage of renewables. And I think the real hidden subject matter really is, and I think Jeff would agree, is energy efficiency. The Commonwealth of Virginia has incredibly generous programs on energy efficiency. The problem is that people don't believe it's true. What do you mean you're gonna come to my house and insulate our attic? Well, you're just gonna break something, then charge me an extra $5,000. And the case is that it is true, and it is free, and it's income and age qualified. And there's a group up here that's done about 10,000 households in Northern Virginia. There's over 500,000 buildings in the region, so we have a lot of work to do, and I think that there's some opportunity there. The other piece is that we're not including the 100 megawatts of solar that's now out at Dulles Airport in these numbers because it's not distributed renewable. There's some Arlington County buys their renewables from a solar array that they bought in with Amazon. So there are some other things that add big numbers to what's happening in the region. You just won't see them in the distributed renewable generation figures.
Great. Well, thank you, Bob, and I appreciate you joining today, and all of our panelists. I'm not seeing any other hands up. We do have one other agenda item this evening, but not hearing any objections and hearing support. Jeff, I think you probably have enough direction now to go back to CFC, correct? And good. All right. Thumbs up. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all again. Thank you all to our panelists and for that conversation. We're going to move on to our next item, which is an update on addressing Metro's financial deficit. Our Executive Director Clark is going to provide us an update on the regional coordination and efforts to address Metro's financial operating deficit. As many of you remember, we did a deep dive into this at our leadership retreat in July. There's been the staff and a number of folks, elected officials and others have been working since then to move things forward. I'm going to turn it over to Director Clark to give us an update.
Thank you. Well, I'm here to kind of tell you we've figured out WMATA's fiscal cliff. So no. Real quick follow-up for the previous conversation. We will work with Jeff and CPC to get you all specific recommendations for board action. And I just want to thank you all for considering that. The time really is now. The amount of money coming from the feds for these projects is unprecedented. And, my only observation, having worked a little bit in solar, over the year before I came here with a company that did work in the DMV. Oftentimes, you set a priority as a board, move on to other things, and we all know things can sometimes get caught in procurement, get caught in back and forth between departments, and I do see some of that with solar in Virginia in particular. And so kind of coming back with some specific goals, with some clarity around those goals for our counties and cities, with a little bit more of a specific game plan in mind, I think can help spur some of this deployment along that I think has taken a little bit of time to get done. So we will come back with specific goals that we can all be proud of. On Metro, I don't think I'm going to report out anything here that's going to come as a huge surprise to folks. We're obviously still working our way through what this fiscal cliff entails. We've set up 3 groups to help make heads and tails from that. One is a group of CAOs from across the region. 17 CAOs signed up to take part in that. And that also has CAO-like stakeholders from different transportation and stakeholder groups working with WMATA's financial team. This includes the CFO of the district and a pretty robust financial team from the district, sitting down and trying to really go line by line with WMATA's budget to help inform you all, the folks that will be asked to take action on this fiscal cliff at some point. And they need confidence when your CAOs report to you that the numbers really are the numbers and they've turned over every rock and figured out every issue. So that is a group that has met a few times now. They're looking at what other transit agencies are doing around the country. They're benchmarking kind of best practices, and they're working with WMATA's financial staff. That's the CAO WMATA cost structure group. There's a group of elected officials with representation from Governor Moore, Governor Youngkin, and Mayor Bowser's office, checking in every few weeks to kind of put issues on the table, make sure we're all the best we can on the same page. So I thought the first meeting we had under 2 weeks ago, I thought was very helpful, hearing directly from the governor's and mayor's teams about what their respective priorities are, what their concerns might be, where we need to be looking, moving forward. We have a lot of groups in this region that advocate and that want to be involved in this. And sometimes they talk past each other. Oftentimes they're asking WMATA and Randy Clark for the same briefing. So they have, back-to-back briefings throughout the whole day. We're trying to streamline that best we can through these two working groups. If there's a chamber group or a partnership that has a question or concern that they want to deep dive on, we're putting that on the agenda for these two groups. We're also, Steve Kanya, our communications director, later this month is having the first communications call with all of our public information officers from the region and all of our communications officers from the chambers, the Northern Virginia Chamber, the Sierra Club, the Greater Washington Partnership, you name it. You name the Chamber of Commerce group or the advocacy group. And this is a check-in call to make sure folks are hearing what needs to be discussed from Metro from 1 month to the next. So a good example of something we need to amplify is Metro has put up the new fare gates. And at the stations where they have put those fare gates in, there is a 70% reduction in fare evasion. That is good news. That is news that we should all be sharing. Obviously, fare evasion is an issue people raise. People can debate how big of an issue it is in the overall scheme of things, but nonetheless, it's something I'm sure you all hear about. So that is something all of our comms officers need to hear, need to be talking about. This won't be a monthly check-in call that merely just regurgitates what Metro would like us to say. It will bring up challenges and issues as they come up. But it'd be helpful to get all those communications officers on the same call. And lastly, Metro closed its books on their last fiscal year just a couple weeks ago. They have a cost savings group that has been working internally to look at that $750 million fiscal cliff for next fiscal year and see what they could do for the coming fiscal year. We are awaiting a report out from Randy Clark and his team as to what that end of fiscal year looks like and what the results of that working group might be. The point has been made, I think, by folks on this call several times that to get all of our jurisdictions, our states, our governors, Congress, whoever needs to be on the same page, it's going to take a little bit of time given the magnitude of this issue. And we may not be able to pull off a permanent fix for Metro right in a series of the next few months. I think we all kind of realize that's a tall task. So I do think Metro has heard that. I think they know we need to be able to do two things at the same time, which is get Metro through this next year and also continue making the case this fiscal cliff is real. This disconnect on the balance sheet is real. It's going to be with us for moving forward, but that we also need a bit of time to think through a holistic solution. So we do expect to hear, I believe at the September board meeting, this will be the topic that Randy discusses with his board. And so in the weeks to come, days and weeks to come, I think we'll hear more on that. That's it for now, Chair. You may have some more to add.
Great. No, I just want to say thank you, and thank you to everyone who's been participating in moving this forward. I think we had a great retreat in July, where the board, decided that this was going to be a priority moving forward, and the staff really has been working incredibly hard since then to really put us on the right path here in the region, and take our role in coordinating and collaboration, and move this effort forward. So now I'll open it up for any other questions or comments. Vice Chair Allen.
Thanks, Chair Stewart. Let me echo your comments of, COG is the place where this convening can take place. I know I've had a couple of different groups that have kind of reached out to me in different ways, almost want to kind of go off and do a little bit of their own thing. I've tried to kind of filter that back through COG and put them in touch with Clark. And so I just encourage my colleagues, you're probably going to have folks that reach out to you do the same thing. I think that's a smart way for us regionally to do it. Clark, I think you're doing just a phenomenal job of helping pull everyone together, everything from that communications check-in to everything else. So just, not that you need to hear it, but for you and your team, kudos on continuing to kind of shepherd this, of knowing how important this is. So I appreciate that. And I'm glad to hear, I think at our July retreat, we gave the general manager a pretty clear task, was that you can't just come to us and ask us to all write a check. We need to see and be convinced that WMATA is taking every step they possibly can. So I'm looking forward to getting some of that feedback, which I guess just leads to one quick question, Clark. Some feedback from folks that in the CFOs type of space, that they've got a lot of really great questions. There's some answers coming, maybe not as openly as they would like, and I'm not sure that they're really still getting the books opened up in a way. And I know that for all of our respective jurisdictions, we're going to count on our CFOs to really be able to dig into the numbers, give us the confidence when whatever that ultimate number is got to be. Can you just share any more about how you feel that, are they getting what they need to be able to see the data, see the numbers, and then in turn, they'll help advise us too?
Yeah, that's a good question. The CAO group has met twice. And so in between the first and second meeting, there was a series of questions put to WMATA that, and when we came for our second meeting, you're correct. I think it was clear that as much work as I think the CEOs expected hadn't been put in. I think some of that is just due to the pace of the two meetings, and WMATA is getting pulled in a bunch of different directions. But your all CEOs were pretty clear at that meeting that the expectation is that they sit down with your financial officers and the CAOs and do that homework in between meetings. You all don't have to hear it from me, but your CAOs and managers are not the kind of folks that can be BS pretty easy, right? So they either see an answer or they don't, and they are not shy to raise their hand and say, we're going to need homework done in between meetings. And I think that message was pretty clear at the last meeting. And we have a commitment from WMATA to do that moving forward. Obviously, when you all talk with either Randy Clark, our board members, and say, look, this CAO working group is an actual roll up your sleeves kind of working group. They're not just looking at the numbers and saying, yes, that's correct. They really do have some questions and some issues that they want to do deep dives on, all with the goal of supporting Metro. That's what we have to kind of keep in mind, is that that's the end goal of why they're engaging. So it a little bit bumpy at first, Charles, but I think it's getting better. I think it's getting to be where we need.
Great, that's encouraging. Thank you.
Great, Chair Mendelson.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. My question was sort of Councilmember Allen's question, but I'm going to reiterate the point. What I've been hearing is that WMATA is not being as forthcoming as it needs to be with regard to opening its books and sharing information. And I'd say that's imperative if the electeds are going to find a solution here. We need to, I believe we all are pretty much agreeing with the same concept. We need to find a short-term solution and to buy some time to find a long-term solution. But WMATA's got to be completely open and forthcoming, and my sense is that that's not happening yet. And I guess I'm sort of looking at Clark, but you sort of already spoke to what Councilmember Allen said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's, sorry, Clark, I don't mean to jump in on you, but Chair Mendelson and Vice Chair Allen, I think that is something that the next meeting that the elected officials have with WMATA, we can also reiterate and emphasize as well. So.
And I would just agree with the chairman's observation. Like I said, I think it's getting where it needs to be. It needs to get there quicker, but there are other ideas out there about other boards and commissions and panels to look at Metro. And the point that we have made to Metro is if we are not getting that kind of transparency that we need, it only bolsters the idea to create yet another blue ribbon panel or commission to do this. And you may be careful what you wish for. You may not want that to happen.
Yeah.
We're working in good faith with you to come up with the same solution that you want. So to the extent that you're meeting with management and say, look, this is the group that we're putting our energy behind, and we need you to dedicate. And I think it's a time issue. I don't think it's necessarily a lack of transparency, but they need to dedicate the time to sit down and open up the books and go through things with these folks, and not just, come to a meeting every few weeks and check the box. Or maybe it's a combination of both, but it's a point well taken.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat or any other hands raised. We will continue to keep all of you updated, and particularly on this issue. If there's anything you need or want answered specifically, please just reach out to the staff. And I'm going to ask and request, and I've started doing this when in Montgomery County, when I meet with our local chambers, business groups, or other community groups, really raising this issue because we need this. This needs to be a full court, like this, all of us really focused on these issues and working on them. And so I just ask, as you all are meeting with your community groups, your chambers, and other folks, to make sure that they're also keeping WMATA front and center in what's going on. So I think with that, does anyone have any other business at this time? All right, seeing none, I want to thank you all for participating in today's meeting. Our next board meeting will take place in person on Wednesday, October 11th. So I hope to see you all at the COG offices. And don't forget, I'm not sure who's going to be providing the lunch, but that we've been looking at local businesses to have our lunches provided. And so I hope everyone will be able to come in person on October 11th. So thank you all and have a great day.